What if the thing holding you back isn't your situation, isn't your habits, isn't even your discipline, but your own brain? Think about that. The one thing you trust the most, the one thing that's supposed to guide you, might actually be working against you. And the scary part? You don't even notice it. You wake up, you check your phone, you tell yourself, I'll start today. But somehow, you don't. Again. And it's not like you don't care, you do. You think about your goals all the time. You imagine a better life, a more focused version of yourself, someone who actually follows through. But then, nothing happens. You stay stuck in the same loop. And here's the part that hurts the most. You start blaming yourself. You tell yourself you're lazy, undisciplined, not built for success. Be honest. Have you ever thought that? Because most people won't admit it, but deep down, they feel it. I know what to do, so why can't I just do it? That question, it's heavier than it sounds. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. What if the problem isn't that you're broken, but that your brain is wired for survival, not success? Wait, don't brush that off, because this changes everything. Your brain doesn't care about your dreams, it cares about keeping you safe. And safe doesn't mean successful. It means predictable, familiar, comfortable. So every time you try to change, start something new, step outside your routine, your brain pushes back, not because it hates you, but because it's doing its job. And that's the trap. Because what feels like resistance is actually protection. But protection from what? That's the question most people never ask. So let's ask it. Why does your brain stop you right when you're about to do something important? Why does it make you procrastinate even when you know better? Why does it pull you toward distractions right when you need to focus? Don't answer too quickly, because the answer isn't what you think. It's not weakness. It's conditioning. Years of patterns, repetition, habits that have been reinforced over and over again. Your brain learned one thing very well: avoid discomfort. And once that pattern is set, it runs automatically, like a script. You don't even realize it's happening. You just feel it. That hesitation, that resistance, that urge to delay. And you mistake it for who you are. I'm just not disciplined. I'm just not consistent. But that's not true. That's just programming. And programs can be rewritten. But this is where most people stop listening, because changing your brain, that sounds complicated, difficult, maybe even impossible. And your brain loves that, because the moment you believe it's too hard, you won't even try. Convenient, right? Now here's where things start to shift. Because the real problem isn't that your brain is against you. It's that you've never learned how to work with it. You've been fighting it, forcing yourself, relying on motivation, trying to feel ready. But your brain doesn't respond to motivation. It responds to patterns, to repetition, to what's familiar. So when you try to change everything overnight, your brain panics. It resists. It pulls you back to what it knows. And then you think you failed. But you didn't fail. You just triggered resistance. That's it. Simple, but powerful. And this next part might change how you see yourself forever. Because if your brain is wired by repetition, then every small action you take is literally reshaping it. Not in theory, in reality. Every time you choose focus over distraction, you're rewiring something. Every time you act despite resistance, you're breaking an old pattern. Every time you do what you said you would do, you're building a new identity. Slowly, quietly,
but permanently. So let me ask you something. If every action rewires your brain, what are you reinforcing right now? Think about today. Your choices, your habits, your reactions. Are they building the version of you that you want, or the one you're trying to escape? Don't overthink it. You already know the answer. And that realization, it's not meant to make you feel bad. It's meant to wake you up. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And that's where control begins. But wait till you hear this. Because understanding this is just the surface. The real shift comes when you learn how to take control of that wiring. How to stop your brain from pulling you back and start training it to push you forward. And that's exactly what changes everything.
And this is where it gets interesting. Because now you know something most people don't. Your brain isn't your enemy. It's just untrained. But here's the problem. You've been living with this version of your brain for so long, it feels like you. Your thoughts feel real. Your habits feel permanent. Your patterns feel like identity. So when something inside you says, change, another voice immediately responds, this is just who I am. And that right there is the illusion keeping you stuck. Because identity is nothing more than repeated behavior. Let that sink in. You're not a procrastinator. You're someone who has practiced procrastination. You're not undisciplined. You're someone who has repeated undisciplined actions. And if that's true, then it also means something powerful. You can practice your way out. But here's where most people hesitate. Because practicing a new identity feels fake at first, uncomfortable, almost like you're lying to yourself. You say, I'm going to be focused today. But your brain responds, since when? And that doubt, it's loud. It's convincing. It makes you want to quit before you even begin. Be honest. Have you ever tried to change and then felt like an imposter? Like you were forcing something that isn't really you? That feeling? It's not a sign to stop. It's proof you're doing something new. Because your brain is comparing the new behavior to your old identity. And it doesn't match. Yet. But this is where things change. Because the goal isn't to feel like the new version of you. The goal is to act like it, until it becomes real. That's the process nobody talks about. You don't become confident and then act confident. You act confident, and then your brain catches up. You don't become disciplined and then take action. You take action, and discipline forms around it. And this next part changes everything. Because your brain is always watching what you do, not what you say, not what you plan, what you actually execute. And it uses that data to decide who you are. So every time you say, I'll do it later, your brain logs that. Every time you avoid something hard, it records that too. And slowly, it builds an identity around those actions. Without asking you, without warning you, it just happens. Now here's the shift. If your brain is constantly collecting evidence about you, then you can start feeding it new evidence. On purpose. Small wins, tiny actions, consistent follow-through. Not perfection. Proof. Proof that you are becoming someone different. Because once your brain sees enough evidence, it stops arguing. It stops resisting. It starts aligning. But wait till you hear this, because this is where most people mess it up. They try to do too much, too fast. They go from 0 to extreme. Wake up at 5 a.m., work out for an hour, no distractions, perfect routine. And for a few days, it works. They feel unstoppable, like they've finally figured it out.
And then they crash hard because their brain wasn't ready for that level of change, so it pushes back, stronger than before, and they end up right where they started, frustrated, confused, blaming themselves again. But this is where things start to shift for real, because rewiring your brain isn't about intensity. It's about consistency, slow, deliberate, repeatable actions that feel almost too easy. Because easy actions don't trigger resistance, they slip past it, and once they're in, they start to build momentum. So instead of trying to change your entire life overnight, you change one thing, one small behavior, done daily, no matter what. And yeah, it might feel insignificant, like it's not enough, but that's your brain talking again, wanting fast results, quick wins, instant transformation. But real change doesn't work like that. It's quiet, invisible at first, and then suddenly, it's undeniable. So let me ask you something. What's one small action you've been avoiding? Not something huge, something simple, but meaningful. Something you know would move you forward if you just did it consistently. Don't ignore that answer, because that's your starting point. That's where the rewiring begins. And here's the part nobody tells you. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to feel confident. You just need to start. Even if it feels awkward, even if it feels small, even if it feels pointless. Because the moment you act, you interrupt the old pattern. And that interruption is where change lives. But this next part, this is where it gets real. Because starting is one thing. Continuing, that's where everything falls apart. And that's exactly what we're about to fix.
Starting feels powerful. For a moment, you feel in control, like you've finally broken the cycle. But then a few days pass, and something shifts. You miss one day, then another, and suddenly, you're back where you started. And this is the moment that breaks most people. Not because they failed, but because of what they think that failure means. This always happens. I knew I couldn't do it. What's the point? And just like that, the old identity steps back in, quietly, effortlessly, like it never left. But wait, this is where things change. Because what if I told you, missing a day doesn't break the pattern? Your reaction to it does. Think about that. One missed action doesn't rewire your brain back to zero, but the story you attach to it, that's what resets everything. Because your brain isn't just tracking actions, it's tracking meaning. So when you miss one day and label it as failure, your brain logs, "This isn't who we are," and it pulls you back to the old pattern. But if you miss one day and respond with, "Okay, continue," something different happens. You protect the identity. You keep the pattern alive. And that's the real game. Not perfection. Continuation. Be honest. How many times have you quit just because you broke your streak? Think about it. All that effort, wasted, because of one moment. That's not discipline failing. That's perspective failing. And this next part might hit a little deeper. Because most people don't struggle with starting. They struggle with forgiving themselves. They expect perfection, instant transformation, no mistakes. And the moment reality doesn't match that expectation, they give up. Not because they can't do it, but because they think they've already failed. I used to think that too. Every time I slipped, I'd restart everything. New plan,
New rules, new motivation. And every time, same result. Until I realized something simple, but uncomfortable. I wasn't building discipline. I was chasing perfection. And perfection is the fastest way to stay stuck, because it creates pressure, and pressure creates resistance, and resistance takes you right back to your comfort zone. So here's the shift. Instead of asking, how do I stay perfect? Ask, how do I keep going? Because consistency isn't about never falling off. It's about how quickly you return. That's it. That's the difference between people who change and people who stay stuck. And now here's where it gets real. Because your brain loves patterns. Not big moments, not dramatic changes. Patterns. So when you stop after one mistake, you reinforce quitting. But when you continue despite the mistake, you reinforce resilience. And over time, that becomes your identity. Not someone who's perfect, but someone who doesn't stop. And that identity? It's dangerous. In the best way possible. Because once your brain believes, I am someone who keeps going, everything changes. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop overthinking every decision. You just act. Not because it's easy, but because it's who you are now. So let me ask you something. Right now, are you someone who stops or someone who continues? No overthinking. Just answer it. Because whatever answer comes to your mind, that's the identity you've been reinforcing up until now. But that doesn't have to be permanent. And that's the part most people miss. Identity isn't fixed. It's trained, reinforced, repeated. And you can start shifting it today. Not by doing something extreme, but by doing something consistent, again and again and again. Even when it's boring, even when it feels pointless, even when you don't feel like it. Especially then. Because those moments, those small, quiet decisions, they carry the most weight. They're the ones your brain remembers. They're the ones that reshape you. But wait till you hear this. Because there's one more layer to this. Something deeper. Something that silently controls everything you do without you even realizing it. And once you see it, you can't go back. Because this is the real reason your brain keeps pulling you back.
There's something deeper running the show, something quieter than your habits, but more powerful than your actions. Your environment, not just where you live, but what you see, what you hear, what you scroll, what you tolerate every single day. Because your brain is always adapting to what's around you. Always. And here's the part nobody tells you. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your environment. Let that sit for a second. You can have the strongest intentions in the world, but if your environment is built for distraction, your brain will follow it, effortlessly, automatically, and then you blame yourself again. But this is where things change. Because once you understand this, you stop relying on willpower and start designing your surroundings. And that's a completely different game. Think about it. If your phone is always in your hand, distraction becomes your default. If your space is cluttered, your mind follows. If you're constantly surrounded by noise, your thoughts never settle. And then you wonder, why can't I focus? But here's a better question. Why would you expect yourself to focus in an environment designed to break it? Now here's where it gets real. Because changing your environment feels small, almost too simple, but its impact? Massive.
Because your brain takes cues from what's easy, what's visible, what's immediate. So if you make distraction harder and focus easier, your brain starts shifting without resistance. No force, no struggle, just alignment. And this next part changes everything. Because discipline isn't about pushing yourself harder. It's about removing the friction that's holding you back. That's it. Less friction to start, less friction to continue, more clarity, more control. So instead of asking, how do I stay motivated? Ask, how do I make this easier to start? Because the easier it is to begin, the more likely you are to follow through. And once you start, momentum takes over. But wait, there's one last piece most people miss, and it's subtle, dangerously subtle. Your internal environment, your thoughts, your self-talk, the way you speak to yourself when no one's listening. Because even if your external environment is perfect, if your internal voice is constantly negative, your brain will still resist, quietly, consistently. You say things like, I'll probably mess this up. This isn't going to last. Why even try? And your brain hears that. It believes it. It acts accordingly. But here's the shift. You don't have to eliminate those thoughts. You just have to stop obeying them. Because thoughts are not commands. They're suggestions. And you get to decide which ones you follow. That's control. Real control. Not controlling everything around you, but choosing how you respond to what's inside you. So the next time your brain says, skip it today, pause. Notice it. But don't obey it. That moment, that tiny gap between thought and action, that's where your power is. And the more you use it, the stronger it becomes. Until one day, you realize something. You're not fighting your brain anymore. You're leading it, calmly, confidently, without force. And that's when everything changes. Because now, your brain isn't working against you. It's working for you. And that version of you, the one who takes action, who follows through, who doesn't collapse after one mistake, that version was never out of reach. It was just buried under patterns, old wiring, outdated beliefs, and now you're rewriting it, step by step, action by action, choice by choice. So here's the question that matters now. If your brain adapts to what you repeat, what are you going to repeat starting today? Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. One action, one decision, one shift. Because that's all it takes to begin. And once you begin, you're no longer stuck. You're in motion. And motion changes everything. If this hits something real for you, don't ignore it. Stay with it. Build on it. And if you want more like this, more clarity, more control, more direction, subscribe and start becoming the person your brain finally believes you are.